Let me read to you a passage from the 6th chapter of St. Mark's Gospel, verses 30 to 34. It's the Gospel for Saturday of the 4th week of Ordinary Time. St. Mark writes, "The apostles gathered together with Jesus and reported all they had done and taught. He said to them, 'Come away by yourselves to a deserted place and rest a while.' People were coming and going in great numbers, and they had no opportunity even to eat. So they went off in the boat by themselves to a deserted place. People saw them leaving, and many came to know about it. They hastened there on foot from all the towns and arrived at the place before them. When Jesus disembarked and saw the vast crowd, his heart was moved with pity for them, for they were like sheep without a shepherd, and he began to teach them many things." That's from Mark chapter 6, verses 30 to 34. It reminds us of the necessity of work and prayer. What do I mean? Well, the stunning claim of Jesus Christ and of the Christian religion, of which he is the founder, is that he, a Jewish man of the time of Tiberius Caesar, was God. This was the special object of the early ecumenical councils, and it is the special objection of non-Christians through the centuries since. Islam, of course, will have none of it, nor will, for instance, our Jewish brothers and sisters. It is the unyielding claim of the Catholic Church of the ages, as it was the claim of the numerous early Christian martyrs of the empire. As St. John lays it down in the prologue of his Gospel, the Word, who in the beginning was with God and who was God, became flesh and dwelt among us. We saw his glory, the glory of the only begotten from the Father, full of grace and truth." John chapter 1, verse 1 and verse 14. However, granted the momentous doctrine of his divinity, we must not forget the obvious fact of his humanity. No one during the lifetime of Jesus Christ who saw or spoke to him or heard others speak of him had the slightest doubt about this feature of his person. He was plainly a man, and his usual designation of himself as the Son of Man served to stress this. But it can be somewhat lost sight of by one who has attained faith in the central point about him, that his person was divine. We must hold together before our minds the two marvellous points that are to be made about the Jesus of history. He is a divine person with his own divine nature, who at a certain point in history and in a certain place took unto himself our human nature, thus becoming truly God and truly man. So then, let us think for a moment of Jesus Christ precisely in his humanity. As man he lived as we lived, but without sin, such that he is the model, the exemplar of the good and holy life for every man and woman in history. This brings us to our Gospel that I read earlier, in which we see the apostles gathering together with Jesus to report all they had done and taught. They had been sent out on mission, and now they were back with their accounts of how it had all gone. They were tired, perhaps exhausted, and our Lord was too. Indeed, we get the impression at times that our Lord's exhaustion reached a much greater depth than theirs. He was sound asleep during the storm. He sat resting by the well of Sychar while the disciples went ahead for provisions. His unending work far outstripped theirs. Our Lord suggests that they come away by yourselves to a deserted place and rest a while. This is one thing we notice about the man Jesus Christ. In his ministry, he is filled with work and service, so much so that at one point his relatives thought he was out of his mind. Mark chapter 3, verse 21. but he does go aside to deserted places to rest and to pray. We read that the morning after many healings and exorcisms in Capernaum, he departed and went to a lonely place. Luke chapter 4 verse 42. Again, he healed a leper and commanded him to keep his healing secret, but news of it got out, and, quote, multitudes gathered to hear him and to be healed of their infirmities. But he withdrew to the wilderness and prayed. Luke chapter 5 verse 15 to 16. At a further point in his public ministry, we read that he arose and went away to the region of Tyre and Sidon, and he entered a house and would not have anyone know it. Yet he could not remain hidden. A woman with a possessed daughter found him out. Mark chapter 7 verse 24 to 30. His hideaway was blown. We read that, I quote, then he returned from the region of Tyre and went through Sidon to the Sea of Galilee, through the region of the Decapolis. Mark chapter 7 verse 31. The Decapolis was also pagan territory, and so presumably something of a retreat. But there was to be no let up, because here too he was presented with a deaf and dumb man for his healing. And so it went on. The point to notice is that the man Jesus, the eternal Son of the Father, sought time and space for rest and prayer with his disciples. So too in our gospel passage I read earlier from Mark chapter 6 verse 30 to 34. He said to them, we read, come away by yourselves to a deserted place and rest a while. People were coming and going in great numbers, and they had no opportunity even to eat. So they went off to the boat by themselves to a deserted place. This reminds us that the disciple of Christ must work and pray. There are many incentives for man to work and to rest. Man's flourishing largely depends on his income, and this normally depends on his readiness to work. Work will naturally require some rest. Such is the will of God, of course, but there are all those natural incentives. What can so easily be forgotten is the duty to use times of rest to take time out to pray. Prayer ought to pervade all our work, but for this to happen, we normally need time out to pray. It is the main reason for the Lord's Day being a day of rest. Let us notice this feature of Christ's life of work. Let us also notice that he takes his disciples, now full of work themselves, apart for a time of rest, a religious rest with God. Let us notice too, though, that once again, when this rest was interrupted to the point of being taken away, our Lord gives himself over to compassionate service. As we heard, people saw them leaving, and many came to know about it. They hastened there on foot from all the towns and arrived at the place before them. When Jesus disembarked and saw the vast crowd, his heart was moved with pity for them, for they were like sheep without a shepherd, and he began to teach them many things. Such is Jesus Christ, our model and our exemplar.